Farheen, I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell me about this Women's Mosque of Canada, so controversial at the moment. Why did you decide to start the Women's Mosque?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, one is that, when you look at the existing mosques, the women, aren't necessarily included in the ways that they can be. We're often marginalized, and the spaces are small physically. We're trying to reclaim our space, so to speak, both figuratively and literally. So, we want to have a safe space where women can come and, pray Salat and read Quran and not have to worry about being judged, but also to be able to deal with some of the challenges that they're dealing with, to be able to talk to people and to other women and to be able to build a sisterhood. That's really important. And also because, we're living in a world right now where there's a lot of gender Islamophobia, and women are, as you know, with the hijab, we're so much more of a target and so much more vulnerable. So, we want to be able to have a space where we can have discussions about topics that are relevant to women, and in particular, these issues around gender Islamophobia, issues around domestic violence. There's so many things that I think women just need to have access to. We don't know a lot about our tradition in terms of the amazing women that were in our history, and it's also an opportunity to learn because, as we know that there's so much relevance to what Islam is, from when it was to even now, then why can't we learn from that and support our women?
So it seems like you're saying that women are, facing challenges from within the community, but also from outside the community as well.
Absolutely.
And you're trying to, help them in those two ways.
In those two ways,
Yes.
exactly, because there's just so much happening. Yeah.
Now, how would you respond to the criticism, that I'm sure you've heard a lot of criticism, both from within the community and from without. I'm guessing you're more concerned about the criticism from within the community. So a lot of people have said, well, why a church? Why did you decide to have the Women's Mosque in a church?
Well, to be quite frank with you, it was because that was a space that was offered to us and it was accessible for us to use. Also because, we wanted to also build bridges. So part of the idea is that if we build bridges with our community, our sister faiths, then, we're able to actually start to have a conversation and start to challenge some of the Islamophobia that we are dealing with, right?
How would you deal with the fact that some people are saying that this is Islamically, disallowed, prohibited? What you're doing is just wrong.
You know what, Sophia? I would just say that I guess my question back to you would be, like, what part of it is impermissible, right? We're basically telling women that generally don't go to the mosque to come and to learn about Allah, to connect with Him, and to read Quran and to pray, right? Like, I don't think that there's anything impermissible about that. Our whole foundation of our faith is about that, right? It's about to learn, it's to pray, and so it's not like we're doing anything that's out of the norm. We know that Aisha radiallahu anha would lead other women in prayer. We know that there were even exceptions where when there were wars happening that women were leading mixed congregations. There were times for that, right? So it's not like there's not a precedence for it, and we're actually doing it just for other women, right? So it's really to be able to say, now inshallah we're going to start study circles, and we'll have iftars, much like a community. It's not a mosque in the sense of a physical bricks and mortar. Inshallah.
So you're not intending to have.
We may, but
okay.
the idea now is to be able to say, okay, women, we're learning so much about our faith, and we're always told about certain things that continue to harm us couched in the sense of religion without really being the case, right? So it's like, okay, learn for yourself, really understand the faith, go back to the origins. Let's talk about the remarkable women that were out there in our history. Let's talk about the fact that we don't have to be silent. We don't need to be, only play one role in our community, and that we have, the ability to learn our faith and to practice it the way we want.
What sort of women are coming out to your events?
So I think it's been pretty mixed. Part of it is that it's amazing because a number of women that haven't gone to the mosque before or went when they were much younger but haven't, or who don't even remember how to pray or don't know how to, read Quran and stuff like that are coming out. So that's really great because then they're actually, in many ways for the first time connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Which is huge for us. But also there's some women from the community as well. I think at this point, because there's so much questioning about whether this is or isn't permissible, unfortunately, that some of the community women that go to the mosque haven't come out as much. But I would imagine that over time, as women start to realize more and more that we're just an alternative space where they can come and connect, that inshallah that'll change.
Do you have a plan to recruit women from the mainstream community?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think it's like, well, part of it is that we're going to start to reach out to some of the community leaders, in particular the women that are mobilizers, and just start to invite them to come in, right? We have interest now from like different politicians who want to come as well. You know, there are all kinds of people from the mainstream community that have expressed interest in wanting to come out. So we're going to continue to do that. In fact, the first one that we launched a couple of weeks ago, that one was actually attended by a large majority of them were also non-Muslim, right? So we had half and half. The ones on the carpets were Muslim, but the ones who were sitting in the back that you wouldn't be able to see, there were a lot of non-Muslims there that were just there to observe.
Okay, so there are non-Muslims and Muslims who are, part of, people who go to the mosque regularly, and there are also people who, are new or perhaps they've been disenchanted for quite a long time,
Right.
and they're coming back now and, they want to learn more. I
For
guess.
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How would the women's mosque relate to other movements around the world? We've seen a lot of women-led movements in the Muslim community, and I guess it's not necessarily recent because there are women's mosques in
Yes.
different parts of the world.
Yes, absolutely.
Not very many, but there are a few.
there
Can
are
you
a
tell me a
few.
little bit about those and how
Yeah.
your project relates to that?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, like, we know that there's the women's mosques in China, and those are like clearly like women imams and women congregations and stuff like that, and that has a lot to do with their history of being oppressed. So the men decided that as a collective community, that it's also important to make sure that the women are also knowledgeable so that they can continue to impart that information and education to their kids, right? Which I think is great. So there's that precedence. But then there's also like the one in Denmark, there's the one in California, the Women's Mosque of America, and I would say that we've kind of modeled our model a lot more to the American group, and so they also started in the same way, doing it at different churches and stuff like that.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
Okay.
and now they're also, now that they've been around for a number of years, they're trying to also build bridges with the existing communities. So just to say, like, let's have quarterly co-ed sessions where we have, like, for example, in Ramadan this year they're going to have qiyam and stuff like that, where there will be a male leading, but there'll be a mixed group, as in like male, and both men and women will be present, right? So this way you were trying to, I think, foster more of a sense of family and community too. Not to say that this is a complete yes, it's a safe space for the women, but also we recognize that we need male allies to be able to make the changes we're talking about.
Several years ago, Dr. Amina Wadood also started a women's-led prayer. Were you thinking of her when you decided to start the women's mosque?
No, not particularly. I know
Okay.
she did. I know she did, but that was a mixed group. I mean, for me, it was just to say, you know what, there are these challenges in the mosque. I grew up in the mosque. My dad started the first mosque in Mississauga, alhamdulillah, so I know very well what the value of a mosque is, but I'm also recognizing that there are a lot of women that just aren't going. So how do you re-engage them and reconnect with them, and how do we create a space that would allow them to come and see themselves in the mosque, So that's essentially what the intention was.
One criticism that I've heard is, you're further dividing the community. The community is already divided, but it's just becoming more and more segmented away. So how would you respond to that? Have you given up on the mosque yourself? And, do you intend to maybe work towards making mosques more accessible and open and to women as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think I've given up on it. I think what I'm doing is that, our leaders obviously need time to be able to make the mosque more accessible. What does that mean, I guess, is the big question, right? Like, even if we made the physical spaces larger, would women be on the boards? Would women have say in the content that's being delivered in khutbahs? Would they actually do khutbahs, right? Like, all of these questions are things that, I don't think realistically, or would you have a separate space where women are like in this women's section only doing their own khutbahs? Like, does that even seem like it's realistic within our existing models? I don't know, right? And so my question is to say, okay, yes, absolutely, we want to have the conversations, we want to talk to the imams, we want to talk to the women within the existing mosque spaces to say, how do we make this more accessible? But at the same time, let's also have that alternative space to say, this is a place where women can come and hear other women speak to them about topics that are relevant to them, and there's nothing wrong in doing that, right, as an alternative space. And if they want to continue to go to the regular mosque, they can absolutely do that.
What are your future plans for the Women's Mosque?
Well, right now, our goal is to really build some sort of a movement, right? Where we're really trying to educate women, we're trying to empower them to really understand the faith and to really shift the mindset of people in our community about the status of women, right, in Islam, right, versus what we're seeing, unfortunately, sometimes in our homes and things like that. So that's ultimately our goal. So we've been talking to girls and young women in different parts of the country to say, let's start the same type of thing, let's start, study circles. Let's start to really understand our faith and our value as women.
Thank you very much for your time, Farheen. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best, really, with this project.
Thank you so much.